grasping that, oh, okay, well, that makes sense, and Port Royal will, annex that, and the type of development would be, as a community, we've agreed on that's what we expected for that area. And that was a real change compared to the early 2000s, when every annexation, just seemed to get a lot of concern about, we just don't have any agreed upon framework for growth. And I would say that of the Northern Regional Plan, this is the greatest legacy coming out of that. When I started looking at the document, I think the question was, is the Northern Regional Plan, is this something that we still need to be going through and looking at recommendations and ticking them off and saying, okay, which ones have we implemented, which ones have we not? I'll go to the next slide. Well, I'll move forward and then I'll back up. I started looking at some of the recommendations, and I think like any old plan, there are some recommendations that seem prophetic and others that, oh my gosh, what were we thinking? And I think that this kind of made me realize that I don't know that necessarily we need to go through all the recommendations of the plan, but maybe back up and look at some of the larger issues that we agreed upon that were important to the region. And this is an example, these are the transportation recommendations. And there are, one of the things, it really pushed the idea of a multi-use path on the old Port Royal Railroad right-of-way. And, nobody said Spanish Moss Trail back then. But, so that came to fruition. But there are also ideas about, I remember exploring the idea of continuing North Street across, using the old rail bed and having a parallel road to Boundary Street on the south side, which I still think, I can see a lot of merit. I think a lot of people would get upset if the Spanish Moss Trail was made into a roadway. But there were ideas like that were batted around then that, or I would just say, we've kind of considered and abandoned. The plan looked seriously at the northern, a third bridge to Ladies Island, and it actually led to the funding of a study that was, I think it went as far as the environmental impact statement for a third bridge. There was this concept of a western bypass. If you build a third bridge coming through the Burton area and connecting on 170, and I haven't heard any talk about that since this plan. So I think that this kind of gives you an idea that to take an old plan like this and just continually be implementing specific recommendations, I don't know how fruitful that is. I think it's a better approach is to look at the broad issues that we all agreed upon when we came together and developed the plan. And I'll back up one slide. This was, and I found this slide when I was looking at when we made our presentations, when the plan was complete and we were presenting it to each of the municipalities. It said that if the plan is successful, it will retain 60% of Northern Beaufort County as rural in nature, eliminate annexation wars, allow detailed coordinated growth planning by county and municipalities, and establish a joint county municipal school district system for keeping track of growth. I would say of those four, I think that the first three have been achieved, are being achieved. The fourth one was an idea we were really wanting to all get on the same page and be able to track growth and kind of use a database. That's not something that we've accomplished necessarily. We try to work together, but that kind of gives you a picture of what the hope was in adopting the plan. And I think it's been successful for three of the four. And I think that the three that have been successful have been, much overshadowed that fourth one as far as the importance to the region. So what I wanted to do, I guess, based on this is there were a set of, if you go to the next slide or two slides, common goals in the plan. And when I think about the future of this committee and the things that we explore, I think that this provides a really good framework. And these are broad statements, but I think that they cover a lot of what this committee has been involved in. The first one talks about, that we're committed to coordinated growth, especially around the current and future edges of communities. Second slide, there's 12 of these. I can run through them quick, and then I guess the idea would be during the discussion, if you want to back up and look at a few. Adequate and timely regional infrastructure and public facilities will be provided in a fair and equitable manner through a cooperative process in which all units of local government participate, act in the spirit of partnership. I think this is something that, we're working on. We coordinate some things, other things, maybe we need to take a look at. Adequate and, go on to the next slide. A strong, vibrant, and healthy economy will be achieved through a successful economic development program in order to ensure the long-term success and viability of the Northern Beaufort County region. I think that's an ongoing process and goal. The next slide. Northern Beaufort County will maintain a fiscally sustainable system of funding regional capital infrastructure, operating and maintenance needs. Next one. Northern Beaufort County will be protected by baseline standards for natural resources, including salt marshes, marsh islands, coastal waters, marine resources, trees, forests, wildlife habitats, beaches and dunes, and open space preservation that each jurisdiction adopts as part of their planning policies and regulations. Northern Beaufort, this is number 6, Northern Beaufort County will maintain a distinct regional form of compact urban and suburban development surrounded by rural development for the purpose of reinforcing the valuable sense of unique and high quality places within the region. Methods of creating and permanently preserving a regional open space system will be developed. An integrated ethnic and socioeconomic diversity of the region will be promoted regionally. In particular, the ability of indigenous population groups to remain a contributing part of the region and benefit from the opportunities that come from growth will be protected. It sounds like a little bit of a run-on sentence. Affordable and workforce housing will be addressed on a regional basis through a multi-jurisdictional approach. Compatible local infill and redevelopment by the local governments will be supported on a regional basis. The Northern Beaufort County Regional Plan will promote the broad public interest, but it will be mindful of the impacts of planning that planning policies have on private property interests. And the Northern Beaufort County will result in the plan will result in continued collaboration with the military facility planners, and particularly will respect the ACUS contours. The interesting thing here is that was the F-18 ACUS contours. Now we have the F-35. And then the last two, I think, specifically deal with the implementation of the plan. So, this talks about each of the jurisdictions incorporating this in their comprehensive plans. And then the last slide talks about, the importance of an intergovernmental agreement for the implementation of the plan. And so I don't know, some of you may remember, but after the adoption of the plan in 2007, it took about a year for this committee to create an intergovernmental agreement. So it's like a 4-page document that specifically outlines the rules of the county and the municipalities with regard to annexation and upzoning.
What year was that again? The IJ 7 or 8?
The resolution was in 2009.
Yeah, so the plan was adopted like late summer, early fall of 2007. And then I think that the intergovernmental agreement was early 2009. So it was a little more than a year it took to finalize that language. So that's what I have, and I guess the rest I'd kind of like to open up to discussion, and if there's any questions. But I just, from looking at the document and going through the recommendations, I don't know that we need to go back and like a checklist, go through the recommendations and say we did this. I think that the better way to approach it would be to look at the common goals and look at the progress and think of, think of how we could build on that and move forward.
The major areas of agreement and resolution are pretty much outlined in this. It's followed by 90 pages worth of backups within the executive group who's here to read it, but it is quite concise and very detailed. I think what I find it very interesting also at this time is that the southern region is beginning to look at the issues that the northern regional plan attempted to address. They're looking at zoning, they're looking at annexation, they're looking at regional growth, and they're looking forward from the standpoint of continuity, conflict, overlap, etc. And it was one of the discussion items at the Soloco meeting last Tuesday. Alice, you're instrumental in going forward with that. Okay, you want to just explain a little bit about what they?
Well, I guess I'll just get down to what the main thing that we ended up talking about for the June meeting is a subcommittee on traffic mission and goals, which would be both Jasper County and Beaufort County. And each locality is to nominate someone to be on that subcommittee and then have a white paper, so to speak, at that June meeting to talk about. So that seemed to be one of the biggest concerns of the Soloco across the board.
Something worth mentioning as well, within that regional plan, the city and town coordinated their own growth boundaries within that growth boundary. And I think that's one of the issues that Bluffton, Hardyville, and them are working towards, trying to figure out where they're supposed to be within maybe a larger growth boundary for Southern Beaufort County.
And that's something they'll have to do.
Yeah.
So we've already done.
Yeah.
The Northern Beaufort County has already done it,
Right.
so, yeah.
So
That'll be an interesting discussion for them.
For them.
So I guess our chore is to kind of decide on what aspects of the Northern Regional Plan, particularly the intergovernmental agreement, we want to address and we think our primary priorities today. I think in our last meeting, we listed a number of items. Transportation was heavily traffic analysis, transportation corridors. Growth boundaries is another issue, and I know in the past year or so, we've had some minor issues with growth boundary considerations and annexations. So all that's on the table. It's what does this group want to, and we're not going to tackle everything, but what we consider as an issue for perhaps going forward with to the next meeting that we want to get a little more in depth about, want to understand a little bit better what appears to be a priorities for us right now.
I was throwing this out there, we'll meet in May, do we want to talk about transportation for the June Soloco meeting for Northern Beaufort County or not? I mean, so.
Just for clarity, when you say transportation, are you talking about Palmetto Breeze or just transportation in general? Okay.
All of it.
All
Gotcha.
of it, all the
Gotcha.
above, yeah. And we had that meeting about Reebok Road, which was a great meeting, I thought.
Mostly infrastructure and the ability to handle the volume we have and the
Okay.
volume we expect.
Gotcha.
So, do we want to get ahead of, do we want to get ahead of that? or
We
not?
could be in line with that if that's what the group feels that we want to tackle as a priority for us. That would give us a better alignment, and some of what we accomplished here could be carried forward and vice versa, brought to our attention as to creative solutions and thoughts about cooperation in the region. So what is the preference of the group here? What do you see that you want to address as perhaps the next issue as we go
I
forward?
mean, we don't have to. I mean,
You said
we could just
transportation is one.
we could just wait and go along with the Soloco, but
So, I'm sorry to interject, but I think Stephanie and myself and Rob and maybe a few others would suggest that you look at the urbanized area that was recently designated for the northern region. And there's a discussion going on right now of separating from LATS and creating a new MPO versus remaining with LATS and what the funding is going to look like for that. If that's the route that's taken, so that might be something this
and
committee
that would be
should
transferred.
address.
Jared would need to be Flalix involved in that.
Yeah, so.
That sounds like a good idea.
Okay,
I think we have some pretty quick decisions to be made.
Yeah, so the deadline for DOT is August 15th.
August 15th, but that means everything
We've got
you
to
need
tell-
to give them
Yeah,
is due on August 15th.
and they're expecting a package. We don't know what that means, so.
It varies depending on your decision.
And that's.
Have they given us any more direction then from
No.
this standpoint?
Not really. I mean, I think if you continue to stay with LATs, it would simply be a map and an agreement. Maybe the councils have to sign something. That I haven't gotten quite the thumbs up on that yet. But if you do decide to become your own MPO, you need a boundary, you need to define your board structure, how it's housed. There's a lot more
Just
intelligence.
creating an entire.
Staff
Yeah.
create 3 or 4 new plans.
So who has the lead for all of that? And where's the entry point for all of us? Is it LCOG? Is it LATS?
It depends how you decide you want to staff it. LCOG is definitely here to help, and we're staffing LATs.
Right.
So as you could determine a different point of entry in terms of how you want to staff it.
Well,
Doesn't have
what
to
I
be
perceive is that part of the struggle of providing responses,
We don't really know.
we don't know who's providing the response and who has the lead for coordinating it. Meanwhile, we have a deadline approaching pretty quickly. I mean, I'm not looking
I
at
don't
you
want
for
to be
answers, I'm just throwing
presumptuous
it
and say I'm
out.
staffing
So-
it, so that's why I'm
Right.
like kind of, hold back. I mean, you
Right.
might decide you want to do it internally amongst yourselves. I'm happy to help and coordinate if you want help with forming a new MPO and guide you and get you connected with DOT and what we need. And then LATS, of course, is a little easier
Sure.
because the structure's already
That's
there.
already-
So do we need representation in this effort to
We're at,
participate on it?
I mean, this is the new,
Yeah.
this would be the new MPO.
Okay. What do we?
The
I mean,
urban
do we
area
need-
is the
do we need
northern
some
side of the
staff
counties.
people assigned to work with this issue?
Well,
to
that's
bring
that's part of the discussion from the standpoint, if we decide to spin off on our own, then we have to create an entire entity as a new MPO. If we decide to stay with the existing and just grow it and hopefully receive more funding, given the fact that we're two, we could be 2 MPOs and we agree to stay as one. And that's also a question that we have not got an answer to with reference to how they will fund us, with reference to additional funding, whether it would be 2 for 1 or 1.5 or, some formula that isn't pie in the sky in Columbia or whatever. So that's been some of the pushback.
We just take
It would be, that's exactly it, whether or not, the conversation has been that there's X amount of dollars that funds all the MPOs. If we create another MPO, it simply just fractures the amount of money that goes to each of the
We're
MPOs.
fighting over the same money.
So, to me, I'm not the decision maker, but it makes much more sense for us to stay together and continue the growth with LOCOG leading the charge, LATS being our secondary regional efforts, but get more money and more guide share. It's like, and nobody will give us these answers with reference to whether or not that's a doable scenario. So that's the frustration that we're all at right now. And of course, then this looming date of August 15th, which, as Stephanie says, you've got to give them who's going to be the new coordinating entity. You've got to have the setup done for them. You have to basically give them the entire regional package to DOT and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And which is next to impossible in a 3-month period.
It has to be identified package.
No, it has to be identified, it has to be identified committees.
Well, they have to even tell us what's supposed to be in the.
We have to know.
Well, yes, I've been working on that too, but I do know generally that would, what it exactly looks like, I'm not totally sure. And I remind them repeatedly every time I see her talk. By the way, have you, I do want to just mention with the funding of the total amount of money that is distributed between MPOs and COGS. About 2 years ago, they added an extra $100 million to that. They hadn't bumped that money up in a few
Many
decades.
years.
Yeah. Embarrassing. But so they have bumped that up, and it's been a slow ramp up to get there. We are not there yet. So all the money that is in that $200 and some million pot has not been distributed amongst MPOs. So we still kind of have that opportunity to pull a bigger piece of that out of LATS, because LATS population, if they use a population-based formula, has basically doubled with the new urban area added to it. Otherwise, being the smallest MPO in the state, you're looking at probably the bare minimum amount being distributed.
Can you be so blunt about it, but under the current construct of LATs, how are the dollars being distributed? And the other reality is it's 7-4. And if we stood up our own MPO, what does that really mean for us? And then you look at Northern Region Plan, where we've decided to be 60% rural, so our populations are naturally going to be smaller than the southern part of the county. I just hope the southern part of the county recognizes the sacrifices being made in the northern part of the county when they contemplate traffic planning. So because we've taken this on for what, how many years now? And it's obviously had some impact while we've watched the southern part of the county grow and a lot of funding move that way. I just hope that they're mindful of what we're doing over here. So.
And the other elephant in the room, of course, is that in doing a separation, Beaver County would be in both, which is like, I don't think it exists anywhere else, does it? Oh, actually, it's not true. We do. There is one, and it's like Horry County, and up there they have some separation in one of those areas, but it's not common, and I'm not sure exactly from a management standpoint how you do that.
I mean, this would be the smallest one instead of Flats being, if we'd be the smallest in
We
this whole
technically would
state,
be
yeah.
this.
If we formed a
Well-
Northern Beaufort County separate from Flats. If Flats is now the smallest one.
Population base, I'm not sure would be the smallest, but we would be the youngest, that's for sure. Would we be the smallest?
Probably pretty close, so
There's not very many in the rural
Sumter
areas
might
that
be
would grow.
small, too, pretty close.
Anyway, but that's the issues.
So the issue before us, and we did identify in our action items list last month as a project potentially, was the question of an additional MPO, the issue of transportation and so on. It appears that the southern region is looking at transportation. The issue for us, I sense here, there's just no great desire to go to an additional MPO because of the fracture of spending and the setting it up in the time frame to
Actually,
do it, or is that?
as the representative on last, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, I'm not speaking for the city, but I mean, I think we want to look very, very strongly at what benefit there is to having an additional MPO as compared to growing the MPO that we currently have.
Okay.
And we wanted to get more questions answered, and unfortunately, they've not really been able to answer our questions.
Can we get someone here, maybe perhaps at the next meeting to help us?
We have somebody.
Yeah, it's just-
That always leads to
I don't know
stuff.
Yeah,
that,
I
Stephanie's prepared.
I could have somebody from DOT maybe at least call in, but they're not gonna share the dollar amount though. They don't know
They
that
don't know.
until they know what the MPO situation is, because we're not the only
Breakout urban area.
the only change. There's some changes possibly happening over by Clemson, because
The Pendleton.
there's
area.
some merging that might need to happen there. So there's some shifting going on in the state. So they haven't completely decided whether the formula that they determine the amount of money, how it's distributed, is based on population, or if they use some other formula like vehicle miles traveled. And some of the coastal communities, particularly Myrtle Beach, have been arguing that population is frustrating for them because their population grows and shrinks.
Like
So,
Hilton
and we're subject to that as well. So there's
Okay.
still some decisions they gotta make.
Can I ask a
Sure.
question? In this group in May, I mean, would it help staff and planners if we make a recommendation to weigh all the pros and cons about the MPO? I see nodding.
Yeah, no, I think it would be. I think we've actually sent that message already.
Yeah, there's just no,
Official,
I feel like there's no
official.
more information that staff can provide to
Yeah, it's almost
decisions.
as if the
Because,
state wants us to
like,
give,
we don't have any
they want
answers.
us to make a determination without a lot of information, and then they'll tell us exactly what they'll do.
Exactly.
It would be an uninformed choice.
So,
An uninformed decision.
Sort of like Tuesday, you know.
so in order to make an informed
Sorry.
have an informed discussion and decision, we need to have questions answered, and we need somebody here to answer those questions for us. And
I
so
would
is it
move-
appropriate to bring somebody to the next meeting?
Yes, and I would move that we bring somebody to the meeting from DOT. Not be on the phone, don't
Drag
be
'em.
here.
Stephanie, can you?
Who would that be?
Yeah, I'll let us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll work with staff. They've been, at the least, they can be virtual, but I would try to get them in the room. It's, at 9 o'clock.
When's our next LATS meeting?
Our next LATS meeting is the first Friday in June and June
It would be after here. It would be right after this.
Yeah, I would probably aim for this
No,
meeting
this,
in
I
May.
think this would be better.
Who is the DOT person for MPOs?
Michelle Peterson is, and Brent Lewis, Ruiz, sorry, are kind of the higher level. And then we have a planner that we work directly with too.
So if this, you made a motion, but I will second it.
Would you restate the motion?
I would move that we invite a member of, or a staff member of DOT who staffs the MPOs, who has the knowledge that we and the information that we need to make a better and more informed decision.
There's further discussion?
Would this body then if we could make a recommendation to staff of all the local governments to do whatever we come up with at that meeting? Is that the intent, I think?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
we could do that one.
I like your idea, Alice, of having kind of a pros and cons analysis, having staff, okay, why would we want to do this and why wouldn't we want
And
to?
we could ask questions.
And each of the staffs of the municipalities in the county will provide input to that.
Okay.
but I think they need to coordinate with LOCOG because a lot of the staff
Yes, of
don't have
course,
full
yes.
vision of what all that
Right.
entails.
Yes.
I think
So we
you're
don't
done.
do it.
Jared would.
Yeah,
Okay,
Jared could be here. I do have a quick question. Do you think that they're gonna be willing to get into the weeds on the funding aspect? Because I think that's where the unintended consequences are gonna surface very quickly. And if they're not willing,
Absolutely
it's,
not.
It's not.
I don't think they're gonna tell
willing,
us.
It's a matter of they don't know.
They may not, that's kind of my
Yeah,
point.
that's-
That's kind of my point,
They
right?
just don't
That's,
want, they don't want to commit to it because it's such a moving target right now.
it is, and I think that is the unintended consequence for all of us, is if we do move in that direction and it negatively affects the funding side of it, I don't know how you reverse that. So, I'm just trying to manage expectations with DOT. They are probably going to create more answers than, create more questions and provide answers, just.
Well, that could be part of what we explore with them, right? What
Absolutely.
are the unintended consequences and can we reverse this if we absolutely decide to engage in it?
It's just hard for me to imagine standing up our own similar Palmetto Breeze for Northern Beaver County. It just wouldn't make sense, but, that's one of the cons of, why
all right,
we
so
do that.
we have a motion and second it. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion passes. Look forward to the presentation. I guess it's just a remaining question is, do we want to tie in somehow, since it's a transportation issue that they're talking about in the southern region and they've formed a subcommittee of staff, how might we want to tie into that? We've assumed that the representatives to the local did the same to this committee. And just keep abreast of the conversation in terms of their goals and what they pick as their next issue.
I think so. So whoever is at Soloco and appointed to that subcommittee, we can just carry it forward, whatever comes out of our meeting in May.
So you're chairing that, you're pulling that together right now. Okay,
I don't know.
we can get further
I
word
didn't
on
mean to
that.
volunteer, but I did.
I know you did. Well, you spoke so eloquently on it, they said, well, we have a volunteer right here.
Why don't you represent?
Yeah,
That's what, okay, that's better.
She wasn't very much there.
Okay, any
Okay.
further discussion on that issue? If not, just a couple things to clear up here before we adjourn.
And can I break 1 second?
Sure.
We had a work session and Sue and Alice were both there with the city and we've had some discussions about the Metropolitan Planning Commission and the revisiting the possibility that the city would stand up its own planning commission. And that which would affect both Port Royal and the county from the standpoint of how we currently do a Metropolitan Planning Commission. So that may be a good conversation to have and to bring back into here, because if indeed and I'm not saying that we're going to, I want to air this with the committee. If we decide to stand up our own and we have some tangible reasons why we feel it's an important opportunity to look at the feasibility and the function of it. But it affects Port Royal if we decide to do our own. It affects the county from the standpoint of the common projects that we have in there. It also affects the land use reviews because that's always been sort of the conduit. Now, we've always done land use through NERPIC as well from the Northern Beaver County, especially with military installations. But those are all effects that would have if we actually did something to that effect. So I just want to bring it up and just mention that this is the body that really should be talking about how the effect of doing that would then resonate through all of our organizations.
Do you want to address that at the next meeting?
If we have time, I think the
The
transportation,
transportation may take it over, but I just want it to be in everybody's mind because that has been a conversation that we're having. We're not moving uber fast on making decisions on this because we have a plate full, but it has been brought up in our planning and discussions, and there's some thought that may be a direction for us, so.
You can give us a status at the next
and
meeting.
I believe the military, Mary Ryan's here today. I believe them in because I have some concerns about processes with the military. And now we, it's always been the air station, but now we have a redevelopment of a naval hospital to think about too, and Paris Island with, resiliency. It's not just the air station anymore. So.
Okay.
Well, it's never really.
It's never just the air station.
I know for.
Yes.
Well, my district is Paris Island and Naval
Is there a
Hospital.
timing element of this, discussion, decision to be made?
I don't think we don't really have a timeline.
There's no hard deadline. It's part of the overall bundle of text amendments to our code that we're considering.
Okay. Maybe you can just, if you would, give us a status of where you stand at next month's meeting.
Sure, I don't
Okay.
think it's gonna be on topic for the next codes.
Yeah, we may or may not have an update by then, but as soon as we
Okay,
do,
well,
provide it.
we'll
But
just,
we'll
just
keep
check
you
with you.
informed.
Check in with you.
Obviously, all the jurisdictions have been a part of the conversation, so.
All right, thank you, Mike. The calendar of scheduled meetings was included with, a proposal was included with your minutes and agenda. As you will note, we did agree that it was gonna be the third Friday of the month, thinking that that's when we generally were meeting, but it was on the fourth Friday of the month that we were meeting. Plus, it was a conflict this month, obviously, because of the Whitehall commemoration that we weren't able to have a meeting last Friday in any event. So we got their proposal for the fourth Friday of the month at 9 o'clock in this conference room. Is that okay with everybody? Do we want to go back to what we voted on last month, or do you want to amend this?
These are the fourth Fridays?
These are the fourth Fridays that are on the.
September is the only one. September and November are not.
Oh, because of Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
November was because of the.
September.
Oh, yeah, I wonder about September.
How come in
It
September?
may be the fourth,
September is the
because
Oh.
the first may be on the first.
Yeah,
because the first is
That
the
is the
first
fourth.
Friday.
Okay.
So 22nd is the fourth
Yeah,
Friday, yeah.
yes.
I was just thinking if there's 5 Fridays, so.
Is this okay with everybody? We need to take a vote to amend that? No, I don't think so. Okay, so we'll continue to have meetings on the fourth Friday in accordance with the calendar that you got.
Maybe we should just agree to this calendar.
Destroy the old one?
Yes, then why don't we just agree to this calendar rather than say the fourth Friday? Let's just agree to the
Okay.
calendar as we have it printed,
All right,
since there's some changes in there with, let's not confuse everybody.
is that okay with all?
Yeah.
Nodding heads. And we have an agenda for next month. We've got 2 items. We also had a list that that was attached on identifying projects. Anybody want to add anything to that list at this time? Doesn't mean we're going to take it up next month, but it's just something that we perhaps would invite for discussion as we move on forward. These were the items that were included in last month's discussion. Page 2. Okay. Hearing none, if continued, if there's anything that comes up that's timely, that you think needs to be addressed as time bound, then by all means, we'll put it on the agenda for consideration. All right, any general comments anybody would care to make? Anything?
Welcome to the meeting Monday.
What about it?
Your planning commission meeting Monday?
Talk about it?
We'll just mention it. If anybody wants to
Well, the
ask.
planning commission again is been remanded to the issue of the CPO and the recommendations for the text change, dealing with the cultural protection overlay district. Is coming under a further discussion at the planning commission on Monday. As you know, it's already gone through that issue, 2 readings of county council and been approved to this point. I look at the meeting being largely legally requirement, that remanding for the text changes. That's correct, Robert?
I'm sorry, I missed it.
The reason we're looking at it is because it's required by state legislation to look at the remand because of the significant text change.
Yes, both the state enabling legislation and our community development code say that the planning commission needs to review something
Okay.
prior to final action by county council typically. Well, further, it's typically earlier on in the process, but this time it's because of the nature of this amendment.
So I wanted to let you know that way, because everybody's been asking, what are we meeting for?
Yeah.
So we're meeting and we'll also have obviously an opportunity for public input, which I expect will be significant. Okay? All right,
Could I mention one other thing?
yes, go ahead, sure.
David and York and I hosted a meeting with Ebony on Tuesday, and it is on our website too, Ebony Sanders. But she's willing to go anywhere, anytime to talk about our reassessment, the county's reassessment, which impacts everybody, so. And she's gonna set up in the fall some meetings at the library too.
Yes, for public outreach.
Right.
Yeah, that was her plan. And she did a presentation for us at city council before as well. It was very, very helpful. And I went yesterday. And the Realtors Association is going to engage her for some much needed education. So,
Okay. Any further discussion? Have a motion for adjournment?
so moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, we did it in less than an hour.
On a light note, Taste of Beaufort Friday and Saturday.
Yes, yes.
Please come. It's gonna be fabulous.